Catastrophic. Ukrainian troops wreck 90 Russian vehicles across 4 square miles of Kursk. Russia's long offensive is faltering. A 4 square mile patch of Kursk Oblast in western Russia is a graveyard for Russian vehicles, and a harbinger of a looming catastrophe for the Kremlin as its year-long offensive in Ukraine begins to falter. Kriegsforscher, a Ukrainian Marine Corps drone operator supporting the 20,000-strong Ukrainian force that has held a 20 by 12-mile salient in Kursk since August, tallied around 90 wrecked and abandoned Russian vehicles just in his 2 by 2-mile sector on the northwest edge of the salient. That's an entire brigade's worth of vehicles. Ukrainian losses in the same sector have been much lighter, just 20 or so. A 4-to-1 loss ratio in favor of Ukraine isn't unusual. In fact, it's only slightly higher than the overall 3-1 loss ratio for the whole 34-month wider war on Ukraine. 14,500 destroyed Russian vehicles against 5,200 destroyed Ukrainian vehicles. What's notable and ominous for the regime of Russian President Vladimir Putin is when and where the Russian armed forces lost all those vehicles. They're what the Russians have left behind in 2 waves of unsuccessful attacks on the Ukrainian salient in Kursk over a period of 6 weeks, starting in early November. A year after Ukraine's summer 2023 counteroffensive ground to a halt and Russia launched its own new offensive, Kursk has arguably become the locus of the fighting. Although, to be clear, fierce battles continue to rage in and around Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, Vovchansk, Kurakov, Vuhledar, and other cities and towns in eastern Ukraine. Putin has given his forces until February to eliminate the Ukrainian salient in Kursk, and for good reason. The Russian regime anticipates the January 20th inauguration of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will mark a new and volatile era in U.S. relations with Ukraine. Trump has pledged to cut off U.S. aid to Ukraine while also leaning on Kyiv to accept peace terms favoring Moscow. When Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reasserted Ukraine's independence in a social media post on November 16th, whatever happens after January 20th, Putin wants to be fully in control of Russian territory as the politics play out. It's for that reason the Kremlin massed 60,000 Russian and North Korean troops and some of the Russia-North Korea alliance's best heavy weapons in Kursk, and began hurling them at the salient 2 days after Trump was elected on November 5th. The initial wave of Russian assaults ran into a wall of Ukrainian mines, drones, tanks, and artillery on and around a road threading past the hamlet of Zelenyi Shylak, the site of a recent Russian war crime. The attack slowed as November turned to December, but only so the Russian regiments and brigades could receive replacement troops and vehicles. The second Russian wave crashed against the salient starting on Saturday. It was no more successful than the wave that preceded it. Kriegsforscher's drone team alone claimed it knocked out 10 Russian vehicles. The human toll has been equally staggering. The Russians have been losing between 200 and 2,000 troops, lose and wounded every day for weeks, exceeding by a large margin the roughly 30,000 fresh troops the Kremlin mobilizes every month. Without those thousands of North Korean reinforcements, the Russian military would be shrinking by potentially thousands of people a week. While Russian forces have recently advanced short distances on the northern edge of the Kursk salient as well in eastern Ukraine, these modest gains belie the Russians' increasingly precarious position. They are dumping entire divisions directly into combat and advancing a few kilometers while sustaining absolutely catastrophic casualties. The combined number is too low to keep Russian regiments and brigades fully equipped. It's not for no reason the Russians go on the attack in motorcycles and vans. The consequences for the unfortunate Russians who swap armored fighting vehicles for unarmored vans can be severe. One UAZ-452 that managed to survive a drone strike later ran over an anti-tank mine recently. That they're on track for eventual collapse is apparent. And when armies fail, they tend to fail quickly and totally, whose own army is in full retreat just a few days after opposition groups launched a coordinated offensive. If anything could reverse Russia's fading fortunes, it would be an abrupt end of U.S. aid to Ukraine early next year. Kyiv has been struggling to boost military recruitment, stiffen its forces' defensive earthworks, reform archaic command staffs, and boost the output of Ukrainian arms factories.